Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real-world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI-powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Today's guest has a very unique background with over 18 years of experience. She's a counterintelligence and insider risk expert, spending time in both the public sector and Fortune 10 organizations. Currently, she's a principal consultant at Viance Group. Lisa Gunning, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ward. I'm so excited to be here. This is such a cool podcast and such a cool opportunity to talk about, cybersecurity, but also on, from my side, the insider risk part. So I'm really excited to get into it and talk to you about all the stuff.
Oh, I'm excited about our conversation. So, Lisa, let's jump right in. Are you ready?
I am so ready.
All right. In your professional opinion, what's the biggest data security challenge organizations are facing?
Well, look, I am not a CISO. I don't pretend to be. In fact, I don't even really align myself very closely with cybersecurity. I am a human behavior analyst. That's the world that I come from. That's my expertise. So I'm going to give you an answer in that world because I think I would be remiss if I didn't. So, humans, right? Like human behavior is the biggest risk. We are an unpredictable, ever-evolving group. And as a very wise colleague of me once said, humans are going to human. And that's just what it is. So, but I will bring it to the data a little bit more to say that today we are absolutely, and I feel like maybe every generation says this at least a couple of times, but we are truly on the precipice of a brand new age. And that is the age of AI. It's the world you live in. And like it or not, it's the world we all live in. And right now, with so much of our lifestyle being enabled by AI, our professional lives as well are going to be enabled in that respect. And there are so many vectors for human behavior to fail and humans to human when it comes to using these tools. I have seen it. So I use a lot of AI tooling for my podcast. And just in a few of them that I have played around with, my mind immediately goes to, oh my God, if this was inside our network, this would be so bad. And I think about, the tools. I will just give one example of that, which is a tool that you can use that will literally follow your actions so that you can very easily show somebody how to do something. It literally comes up with a set of instructions for exactly what to click on, how to do this, how to do that, so that you can send this gorgeous, perfectly spaced and lovely visual of how to do an action. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God. If this was being utilized by people within the network, how many vulnerabilities could we possibly enable here? And the answer is a lot. And so Anthropic and ChatGPT, OpenAI, have put out publications that show how dangerous they are. They have been very vocal about how their AI tooling can actually be used to enable, assist, suggest, and become insider threats themselves once they're in the network. And so I think this combination of increasing technology in the way that we are currently just pumping out new ways to leverage AI. It's great. I am not an AI hater. I am an AI user and lover. Asterisk footnote. We have to be careful. And so my main point of saying this is not to say we need to play whack-a-mole with all of these AI tools. That is not the answer here. The answer is to partner extremely closely with insider risk and the cybersecurity functionality and make sure that we are working together to train, make people aware, make, the bad lists and things like that to ensure that we are staying on top of this and not being complacent about it, because it only takes a couple of these things entering into our systems to do extreme damage very, very quickly. Not to mention the long game that I talked about in terms of the AI actually like helping people come up with great ways to become an insider threat. And believe me, I haven't played around with it, but I can only imagine it has a lot of really smart, clever ways to do that. So
Yeah, I mean, so two very interesting things there. So first, humans totally agree with definitely one of the biggest data security issues we have. But
it's forever, it's perennial. Like humans are always going to be our weakest link and our greatest asset, if depending on how we do it. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. But also thinking about AI and what you were just hitting on with yeah, it could help you to be insider risk indicators, pivoting into an insider risk. I was just thinking the other day, like I was trying to do something, and my old school man, can't believe I'm saying old school for this. I'd bring out Google, right? Google it, search through all the things, and that's not that old. But I went to good old GPT and said, "How do I do this?" And voila, right? It gave me the step by step. So I think you're right. Combining humans being human plus AI, the human's going to want to do something. They're going to type it in, maybe not knowing well enough to check what came back. They're going to follow it. Yeah, and open up a huge gap, or they're going to use it for nefarious means, right?
You can see use cases on both sides. You can see them using those malicious insiders who really have intent to harm, commercial espionage, sabotage, whatever the case may be. Yeah, AI can help them there. But the real bulk that I'm concerned about with the AI tooling is humans that are just trying to make their lives easier. Because who doesn't want that? And that's literally what AI is promising us all. We will take off your plate those things which you do not want to do or don't want to think about or don't want to like put effort into. And so that's the population that I'm really concerned about, is people who genuinely just want to either do better at their job or do faster or do more or whatever the case may be. And they're going to leverage AI without even thinking about the ramifications that can come from that, especially because we do have AI tooling coming out of nation states that are openly hostile to us. And I'm going to call out China. And I know it's early in the podcast. We are only 7 minutes in, but I'm a CI person at heart. I have to call out China. That's my background, to say, like, they are producing AI tooling that is free and useful and all sorts of things that seem really, really good on the surface until you know just a nugget about the potential downsides of that. And they are massive.
Well, let's go into that. So you said the biggest challenge is humans, and again, I completely agree. We've been in cyber and technology. We've been dealing with humans being humans for the last, I mean, forever, right? I'm not even going to put a number of years there. So in your career, being counterintelligence, insider threats, what have you done? What have you done to try to curtail humans being humans, or at least train them to do better?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really comes down to this division between those human. So I put them into three categories. Not everybody does this, but this is the way that I see it. I see the malicious, nefarious types, right? They're roughly 20 to 30% people who, for whatever reason, just want to do harm, whether it be for ideological reasons, their own personal benefit. Maybe sometimes they just want to stick it to the man and they just want to, just cause havoc, right? We have seen cases even recently of that, where they just want to like be detrimental to their workforce. Okay, so that kind. We have the biggest section, which is those who are doing harm to the network, to the company, whatever, accidentally, because they just don't know better or they just don't care, right? So those are the ones, because they're the bulk of them, that's actually good, because that is behavior that we can train away. With really good, solid education and training, we can tackle that group of people. It's hard. right? I'm not going to say that it's easy. I'm not going to say that covering every single use case to make sure that people are doing the right thing for the right reasons is easy. It's difficult, but it's there. And then we have the third group, which I say is the insider enabled activity. And that's really the biggest crossover with cybersecurity. So those are the people that are enabling the bad thing. Yes, it also falls into the category of negligent insider, but that's a very specific thing where they're being called up on the phone for social engineering, and they're giving the names of the people and the numbers of the people and things like that. That is insider enabled activity. They have absolutely no idea what they're really doing. And there's 100 use cases of this out there. And the crossover between that and cybersecurity is huge. And making sure that these disciplines are working in lockstep together. So that has always been my goal, to understand in a given organization what the distribution of those things are, and then work directly with the stakeholders who have the biggest amount of buy-in to those to make sure that we're working together. So in that in that malicious and nefarious category, the main stakeholders for that are the people who have the mission that is critical. Those critical assets that really produce the golden goose for the company that you're working for, or the agency, or whomever. That's going to be your main stakeholder for those that group of people. Not to say that you can't be a malicious insider and work as a janitor. You absolutely can be, but where we want to find the bulk of those people is going to be in those mission critical organizations. And so there's your stakeholders there. In terms of your, accidental and negligent folks, we're going to be working with CIO. We're going to be working with compliance. We're going to be working with training and education. We're going to be working with those folks to really understand what training is out there, what compliance is out there, and what policies can we lean on to make sure that enforcement is possible. Because if you don't have any policies backstopping what you're doing, then you are just for show. You're just showing up and saying, hey, you did a bad thing. We totally agree with you that you didn't mean to do the bad thing, but you still did the bad thing. Also, I can't do anything about it because we have no policies or compliance requirements that say that I can do anything about it. So we had a conversation, consider yourself warned. So you really have to have the backstopping of the policies and compliance to actually do anything. So those are the really critical stakeholders that you're going to need for that. And then for the insider enabled, it's cyber. It's the CISO organization, 100%. And then, of course, there's always ones that are through lines: HR, privacy, employee relations, legal. All of those are through lines throughout all of those. So really, really making sure that you've got alignment with those critical groups, depending on what is the biggest concern for you and your organization. That's the way that I have approached it. That's been my strategy.
That's a great way to do it. So, I'm thinking back to some of the episodes that we've currently had for this podcast, and we've had a few guests that have talked about partnerships, right? Business partnerships, business alignment. You hit on that, which is amazing. Something else that I was hearing you say aligns to my last guest, Lance, was talking about visibility, right? So actually getting visibility. His was more into the data, but also, what I'm hearing you say is like the business operations, what people are doing. And you hit on policy, I think, and then that reminded me just of a few cases in my past where I had a similar interaction where I'd go in and scold somebody and say you can't do that, and they'd say, "Oh well, show me the policy." I don't want to do that. Showing the policy is like, "Oh shoot, we don't have anything in writing." Like, of course you didn't know any better, and actually very similar. Like you've been warned. Please don't do it again.
Well, we'll get back to you when we make a policy about that. Thanks for the reminder.
Right, right.
Exactly. But that goes to security culture. And I think I really want to make sure that I'm mentioning about security culture because it has become sort of the thing that I come home to when stuff goes wrong or when I'm trying to build a program. I want to get to an understanding of that security culture and work with senior leaders to understand, what do you want the security culture to be? And then if they are way off the mark with security culture, and I'll give an example of that, if the security culture, I'll put that in quotes for those who are watching, um, if the security culture is we assume everyone is doing the right thing all the time, then it becomes your job as the expert to say, here's why that's not the case. Let me bring my expertise to bear and educate you to make you understand that that is, in fact, a rather naive perspective. And I absolutely agree that most people, most of the time, are trying to do the right thing. And sometimes they fail at that. That's absolutely true. But it is not accurate to say that everyone is doing the right thing and sometimes they fall down, because there are absolutely people who are doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons and the wrong thing for the right reasons. And I'll give an example of that. Somebody who's trying to increase their productivity, maybe they use an unsanctioned AI tool, maybe they bring their own laptop and say, well, my laptop's faster, so let me bring my work over to my own laptop or my own computer and work on it there. That's doing the wrong thing for the right reason. Still need to correct that behavior.
Yeah, and I've seen that. Just an organization I worked for, they had a BYOD, right? Bring your own device type of perspective. Um,
Those scare me to death.
oh, yeah, and it wasn't, BYOD, bring your own device. That makes sense. You're going to have your own device, but where that started to go awry was now people thought you could bring your own applications as well. Something that you touched on before. It's like, oh, hey, the enterprise standard is this thing. I can't think of a good example right now. Somebody else is kind of like the Ford or Chevy type of thing. Well, I don't like that thing. I like this flavor of thing, so I'm going to use that one. And that one may be open source, wrought full of vulnerabilities, and there you go, right? You as the organization try to do the right thing culturally, BYOD. You did come up with sanctioned apps that people were getting to, but oh my goodness, they started using this other thing, and now they've got data or whatever sitting in an unsanctioned location, which is never a good thing.
Right. Absolutely. Yes.
You talked a lot about building up those partnerships. Where did you typically go from there? So you started forming relationships with the business, started to identify those various categories of risks. What was the next step?
The next step for me has always been to show those stakeholders, those partners, those organizations that I'm working with, that they are my customer at the end of the day. Every single one of the organizations that I just mentioned, and probably a dozen others, are all customers of Insider Threat, in my opinion. And we are working towards the greater mission. When I was an intern at GM when I was in grad school, and on the first day, I walked in, and one of the leaders in the security department, because I was working in global security, said, "What do we do here?" And I said, very excited about my first day at GM, I say, "We're security. We make everything secure." And he said, "No, we make cars." And I said, "Oh," that was my first view of like what is aligning to the mission. And so that is the thing that we are all working towards. And I know that you have had other guests that said like we need to have a mutual aim. The mutual aim is the mission of the company, period, or the mission of the agency or whomever you're working for. That is the core thing that we are all working towards. And so in that relationship, every single one of those stakeholders is a customer of mine, and I am going to treat them as a customer of mine. So making sure that the facilitation of conversation is fluid and without any kind of reprisal potentially, right? I want HR to show up to that meeting with investigations and ER and legal and feel completely open to saying what's on their mind. And so what I have done in the past is sort of create a bit of a bubble, right? I find people, it takes a while to do this, but I find people that I know are willing to speak their mind and they want the best for XYZ situation or the mission or whatever it is. I handpick those individuals, I bring them into a group, and then I say, this group, everything stays here. We will use our learnings from this conversation to inform policy or to inform the leadership further on. but this is a safe space for you to bring up the concerns that you have. And I have found that that was incredibly effective for allowing people to speak freely and question each other. Why do we do it that way? Why is that the way that it is? Why can't we do it this way? In my experience, I've found this to be the thing. Really? I had no idea. And the number of aha moments that were struck in those conversations where people were learning basic functionality of the teams they were working with for years and had absolutely no idea. It was so informative for how we were going to go forward and how we were going to build together. So, really creating a safe space where open conversation is encouraged. There is no tattletaling for sure. There's no running back to your organization and saying you won't believe what HR is doing. It's not that. It's a way to openly work together so that we can solve big problems. And so that would be my job in that situation as the insider threat program manager. I would bring the big problem. I would say, all right, hiring. What are we going to do here? Who's got ideas? The first thing I would say is, where are the biggest problems? And I would go around the room. Every single person has a dog in that fight. Where are the biggest problems that you're seeing? Oh, it's background checks. Oh, it's device handling. Oh, it's training and awareness. Whatever it was, all the way across. Okay, now we have a big list of all the biggest pain points. Now let's figure out how to fix them together. And that's what we're going to inform the leadership about.
That's amazing. And yeah, I love the idea of the safe space, the circle of trust, whatever the organization calls it. I'm curious on your opinion here because I've been seeing this more and more, which, in my opinion, may actually be a detriment to what the safe space that you're trying to set up. And it's those, you said AI before, I'm going to say it again, those AI note takers, right? And in our new world of remote work where everyone's remote to each other, a lot of these safe space conversations are probably happening via Teams, Zoom, WebEx, you name it. And there may be a fear to be open because one of those gosh darn AI note takers are sitting there. What are your thoughts with that?
Absolutely, right? You have a double whammy of like trust issues at this point, right? Because you've got the people in the room and you've got the not people in the room, and making sure that you're being sensitive to that. And so one thing it would be to be very transparent about what is allowed and what is not allowed. So if you are having a incredibly close hold conversation, then you might just say, "We're cameras on, we're note takers off." I want to be able to look into your eyes. I want you to be able to see my face and my expressions and know that we have trust in each other. And anybody that has been to any of my working groups, tabletops, special interest groups, whatever, it knows that I am big on cameras on, no takers off, because I want there to be openness. Otherwise, what are we doing? I am the person who's going to say, I'm going to just cut off this meeting because we're not being productive here. People aren't being open. We're not being clear with one another. So let's take a beat. We'll come back next week and we'll try it again. And I am perfectly comfortable doing that.
It's bold. I've seen very few people. I've seen a few people do it, and everyone's like always shocked when it happens. But I think when it does happen, everyone's like, "Oh, okay." And you don't resume right away, right? Once everyone gets that shock value, you let that sink in, and then they come the next time, and be like, "All right, I'm here. I'm gonna be productive."
Well, absolutely. Nobody is trying to have meetings for meeting's sake. Nobody has got that on their list of things to do today. Everyone has a list a mile and a half long, and it is make the biggest impact that you possibly can today. And sitting in a meeting where people aren't being trustworthy and aren't saying things that are open is not helping anybody get through their list.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Sticking with the AI note taker real quick. Also interested about your thoughts here. Some of those note takers are invisible to others. I know of a few out there that, we have these cell phones, right? Are always around. You could have things there. I know there's applications you can have locally on your endpoint that'll do it. For an organization that hopefully has a little bit of control around those things, like What might you suggest to them around usage of those invisible AI assistants?
I think it's like anything else. There's only so much that you can do. If somebody is going to use a completely standalone device and put on a voice recorder or put on a note taker that is completely without your ability to see it, okay, that's I don't know that there's a solution, for that from a technical perspective. But you do want to, and I go back to the training away the negligent and ignorant, is to make sure that people understand what is possible and what is not. And I think that comes down to making a rational policy. If we're going to go to the policy route, let's make a rational policy that says if we're talking about organizationally confidential information, you may not use a note taker of any variety. However, if we were having a conversation that is, let's say, about your performance or something like that, that you would want to have a record of that you need to reflect back on, I feel like you could make certain exceptions that make sense. And I feel like this is where a lot of data policy and even security policy kind of falls down on the job a little bit. They like to make a real thick black line and say, thou shalt not under any circumstances, right? And because that's one, it's easier for us. It's easier to enforce. And two, it's just, it's a little bit of professional laziness, maybe a bit on our part. So, but making policies that are one, able to be iterated on. This technology is changing so fast. There is no way that you're going to make a policy today about AI tooling and it's going to be even remotely valid in a year. So you have to make it such that you can constantly iterate on it and change it to make sense for what's going on. I find that a lot of those, in particular, the group of insider threats that do the bad thing for the right reason, it's because they feel like the policy doesn't make sense for them, right? They have decided that it doesn't apply to them because it's not rational. And so working with those edge cases, and this is something that I did, going back to security culture, what makes sense for you? What do you have to do in your daily job? And then use the big M. Mitigate. Mitigate the bad stuff. Make it make sense. And I know, I'm sure every person listening is going, yeah, that is so much easier said than done, right? Making it make sense for edge cases. But again, use that rational thought. Where are the edge cases that are moving the mission forward? The people who are doing the risky thing because it helps the mission. Those are the ones we really need to mitigate around and make sure that they can still do what they're supposed to do. Because if you go for a no USB thumb drive policy and you have people who are doing mission critical things and they require thumb drives for them, what are you going to be doing? You're going to make yourself the bad guy so fast. It's going to be a you versus them, and the mission's going to win anyway. So you're putting yourself in a losing position right away. So mitigate, find a way to work with it.
It's funny that you mentioned USB because I've dealt with that plenty of times
Of
where
course.
it's like, why are you still using this, old technology? And it's funny you mentioned GM before. I too worked within a vehicle manufacturer, and it was people on the shop floor that had to use the USB to plug into the onboard computers, right?
Exactly. When you got that air gap, sometimes that old technology of a USB thumb drive is the only way to go.
Yeah, the old tried and true trusty way of doing things for sure. I'm really curious. So, again, thinking about your experience, we've talked a lot about insider threat, insider risk, the whole challenge of humans. I'm really curious to kind of, and I'm sure the audience is too, to hear about how that human issue really plays in the counterintelligence side as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, counterintelligence at its core is about humans. It's about exploiting, in most cases, human intuition, behavior, and counterintelligence in the corporate sector is truly the most underrated um, facet of the security protection organization because so many companies do not realize that they are truly the front lines. And I'm not even talking about the ones that have US government contracts. I'm talking about anyone who is doing anything that could be of value. We are very fortunate, and I'm going to bring up my old friend China again. We are very fortunate that China publishes every 5 years the list of things they're going to go after for our technologies. If companies, any company in the Western world is not looking at that list and checking off those things that they have a part of, even if they are not responsible for the end product of, say, an unmanned aerial vehicle, but maybe they have a piece way back here. Maybe they don't create the supercomputers, but maybe they make the semiconductors that go into the supercomputers, right? China makes a list and they publish it for anyone to see. Hey, these are the 25 things that we want to be dominant on in the next 5 years. And they are so bold. Let's take advantage of that. Let's have every single company look at that list and go, oh, they want biomedical. We need biomedical. I didn't know that China would be interested in what we do. That is, in its most basic form, counterintelligence, right? That's the very, very nugget of counterintelligence, is understanding what the nation state adversary is after, and do I have that thing? Or do I have anything that could be of value? So any company that has anything that even touches that list at a minimum should have some awareness and defense against counterintelligence activity. And we can go into all the facets of that, but
That's an amazing thought. Again, thinking back through a lot of the organizations I've worked for, when I've joined, I've joined to build a data security program. And oftentimes I would start with, what is our data? What do we have? What's our intellectual property? And many times I get the basic, oh, we've got PII, we've got PCI. I can't say that I've personally, and you bet I'm going to change this. I can't say I've personally gone and looked at China's list or anybody else's list and said, okay, what are you after? Go through the 25, whatever the number is, those things, and draw the parallel back to my organization, my services, or even my data. That is amazing.
and not only that, I'm going to take it back one more step to the human. Who are the humans who are working on those things? What are their vulnerabilities? What are the inherent risks within the organization? And that's where we can really partner with cyber, because cyber is going to tell us what guards, gates, and guns do we have around this data and these people. Okay, HR, tell us what you've got. Travel security, tell us what you've got. Data security, tell us what you've got. CIO, tell us what policies you've got. And that way, once you draw on those lines, and I mean, how easy is that of a slide to put up with all those stakeholders, say dot 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 right to this organization? You can easily make that claim and say, this is what they're after. These are the people who work there. What can we do to protect? And that is a different discipline that I call insider protection. You're taking those vulnerable insiders, you're wrapping your arms around them, and you're saying, hey, in the nicest possible way, without scaring them, you're a bit at risk here. The work that you do is incredibly important to us. It is valuable to us. We want to make sure that it's protected, and we need to make sure that you are protected. And that is the initial opening of those conversations that you have with those high-risk individuals, to say, like, we're on your team. We are not big bad security. We are not looking to just levy all kinds of requirements on you. We are here to protect you so that you can do your job and it doesn't get wasted. Because the last thing any mission critical person wants is for their hard work to go somewhere else, right? Whether it be a competitor or a nation state or onto the cutting room floor. That's the last thing they want. And that's the mutual agreement that you can have with them. You have that mutual aim together.
And I think that's interesting because I'd like to think, I know I've seen it in my organizations, like most, if not all organizations have a VIP list. All right, here's our very important people. I think a lot of those lists start out as, I'm going to protect my CEO, of course. I'm going to protect their admin. Yeah, right. And they probably start iterating down from that CEO. I've seen others where, hey, these IT folks have admin rights. I'm going to protect them. That makes sense too. What I can't say that I've personally seen is kind of what you're describing, which is, again, go look at those lists of what those actors are trying to do, mesh that up against what the organization does, and then really start at the boots in the ground level to say, hey, we build military vehicles. Guess what? You're turning a wrench on that military vehicle. You might be somebody that could be targeted.
100%. And if they are the ones turning the wrench, that's probably going to go a little bit more towards insider threat than cybersecurity, right? Because they're going to have that analog interaction with the mission critical element. So we're going to be looking for other behaviors that might end up on the network, but maybe they don't start on the network. Maybe they start with a change in behavior. Maybe they start with being a bit disgruntled. Maybe it starts with them changing the hours that they show up to work or fighting more with the people. That's all precursor to the data issue. And so that's where we can really partner with the cybersecurity group to say, like, we've been watching what's happening. We're concerned. Let's put our arms around this person and from a data protection standpoint and make sure that we don't have any issues because we don't want to be right of bang. Nobody wants to be right of bang. We want to be all the way to the left so that we can watch and understand the human behavior, not to assume that they're doing something bad. We're not predicting their bad behavior. We're making sure that we're protecting the data and protecting the individual because, if that person does end up doing something bad, they could get fired. They could get a fine. They could go to jail. A bad thing could happen to them. So we want to prevent not only the loss of the mission element that we have, the data that we have, we want to prevent that person from making a life choice that they're going to regret forever and ever and ever. So how do we intercede in that case? And that's where our partners from ER and HR come in. And we can say, all right, let's work together. Let's find the best way to intercede here because we see a bad pattern happening. But you can only do that if you've done that pre-work to understand who those people are.
Right, and there's a lot of work there, right? Let's not kid ourselves. And some folks listening, some organizations listening, may say, "Man, this is all smart stuff. Where do we start?" There's been a lot of stuff in the news. It's ongoing, but I'm thinking, it really started 2 to 3 years ago. We were seeing and hearing it more and more, and again, AI is helping it, but it's those deep fakes, it's those agents that are applying and getting into organizations. Just from my side, I was in an interview process with a consulting firm, and I live kind of in the middle of nowhere. There's not a lot of tech, and they're like, "Oh, we like you. Part of our interview process is to actually meet you in person." And I was like, okay. And they sent this individual, like, it was a 3.5 hour drive for them to come meet me, sit down and talk. And I said to them, because I wasn't really following the news, I was like, what is this about? Why are you spending this time? Like, do you do this with everybody? He goes, oh, well, yes, we do. And it's because, that was around the same time of, North Korean spies getting hired in. So for those that are listening, really taking insider risk, taking some of the counterintelligence, all that, and really bringing that to kind of the first stages. Actually, before the first stages, right? They're not even an employee; they're a prospective employee. What do you recommend for folks around this?
This issue, this incredibly pervasive issue, and I will say this is my very quick soapbox PSA. If you are in any way related to the security of a company and you have kidded yourself into thinking that this is not going to affect you or hasn't affected you, please take a minute and reassess because you're probably wrong. It is that pervasive, right? And yes, it started with North Korea, but we are already aware that other countries are copying this behavior because it was so dramatically effective. So that's my PSA. I'm going to step down from that now. But I will say this fraudulent IT worker concept, I'm going to say something maybe controversial here, was a gift. And I know that sounds weird to say, but I cannot think of a better issue to bring every stakeholder across a community together to work on a problem. And I absolutely believe that it has solved many, many, many problems within companies that they were not interested in solving before this happened. Hiring, recruiting, interviewing. I mean, again, that's literally before they even become an employee. All of those background checks and investigations, criminal checks, making sure that people are real. We're doing things now like put your hand in front of your face. Let's see what happens. All of these things, we're combining the work of investigations, cyber, SOC, insider threat, privacy. We're literally, when I was running this at the last company that I worked at, we had everyone on the same page working towards the same problem, just wanting to make it better for the company. And I was like, I cannot think of a more cohesive way to get everybody together than to solve a problem that we all had. There was not a person in the room that was not completely on board with solving this problem, getting the people out that shouldn't be there and stopping them from coming in. I mean, it was beautiful in that respect.
Well, I mean, and what do they say? Never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
100%. Yes, we
Yeah.
used that quite a bit to say, let's get this hiring program going. Let's do a little bit to work together to solve this problem. So, I mean, that has really been, to me, that was a huge, huge, huge gift from my perspective in that organization, to say, like, we can all come together. We were able to disperse out, like, you handled these logs, you handled this problem, you handled this, and literally as soon as we got an IOC, we were ready to shotgun it out to every single person, and everyone brought it back to that central unit so that we could say, what do we have here? And it was great from that perspective. I know other organizations have had a lot of success with rooting out these issues, and I would be interested to hear. I don't know if you get a ton of comments, but I would love to hear and see in the comments if people have had success by bringing together disparate organizations that were previously not super keen on working together.
I love it. So yeah, I will also call out to the audience, folks, if you're able to on LinkedIn, whatever, please put in the comments, have you had success? Tell Lisa and I your stories. We would definitely love to hear them. So um, you've got a very impressive background. I'm curious, going back to you've been in the industry, we'll say 18 years. What got you into it? What put you down this road of, counterintelligence and insider threat?
I fell in love with counterintelligence very quickly once I became a special agent. I learned pretty fast that background investigations was not my calling in life. Not super interested in that. Knocking on doors and hoping that somebody answers with their pants on. Um, so not always the case. I once knocked on a door for a neighborhood check, which they don't even do now, by the way. So, like, this is completely antiquated behavioral work. But I knocked on the door, and the person had an arsenal of weapons just inside their door. And I was like, you know what? I'm all set. I'm gonna head next door. I think I'm good here. Whatever
Oh
whatever you have to
man.
say, I'm just gonna mark it as great. And I just bounced right out of there. So I learned pretty quickly that that was not my favorite thing to do. And I got the opportunity to go to and start up a brand new organization within counterintelligence, which in my agency is within security. And that's quite rare to have CI and security together. I think it's a good match myself. I think it's a great way to make sure that you have synergy across, and that you're using that counterintelligence organization not just as a proactive preventative step for counterintelligence issues and investigations, but also, and this is the way that we did it, to train everyone else in the security organization about CI issues. So we had a really good flywheel of using good information and sharing it across. So just a note on my part. So I was asked to stand up a brand new organization within CI that was going to be a relative copy of what was already being done against to combat people coming into the agency with questionable ties to terrorism. So most agencies at that time, and we're talking like 2008, 2009, at that time, you had to hire people with low density languages. You just had to. Like, there was no way around it. So it was not a matter of getting somebody who was squeaky clean. It was a matter of like, how do you mitigate out some of this questionable ties in order to get the language that you need? They also quickly realized that they needed the same thing, but they needed it for counterintelligence issues. So we're talking Israel, Russia, Iran, Cuba, China. Those are the primary ones. And within a week or two of standing up this brand new branch, this brand new program, somebody put a folder on my desk and it was somebody from China. And from then on, I was the China person. There was no going back. There were only 5 of us. We each had a country, and mine was China. And I did fight against it a little bit and then relented once I realized, ooh, maybe I can learn the language a little bit. Maybe I could go there. Maybe, it's all of these like options started popping up for me. But I dove into it head first and wanted to be that subject matter expert. Even though I was brand new to counterintelligence, I wanted to be that subject matter expert. I wanted to have a niche that I could really call my own. And I really found that particularly in folks who had done study abroad in China, which is an incredibly high risk scenario that most people, even to this day, do not know about. So Glenn Duffy Shriver is a great example of that. He applied to CIA. They did find he did not get in. Please look up this case if you don't know the Glenn Duffy Shriver case. It's a really good one. He did a study abroad to China. He was recruited in China, and the rest is sort of history. But at the time, this was prior to that case coming out, we were really, really looking at study abroad groups. And so I would really encourage people not only to look up that case, but to also make partnerships with your intern programs and with your hiring and recruiting programs to understand if somebody has a study abroad or a fellowship or whatever they want to call it, because they call it a lot of different things, to China. That should be something that you are immediately sending over to Insider Risk if you have an Insider Risk team. Like, right away. Get them on board, work together. It might totally be possible to hire the person, but you want to understand the full scope of that. So that's another little PSA. Sorry. I have seen some real questionable stuff come over. So I just fell in love with CI. I was asked to follow one of the senior executives from security over to the company that I initially worked for outside of the government to help stand up the China program there because they needed a CI program specifically helping with China. And so that really opened my eyes. You would think that 12 years as a special agent working counterintelligence would open my eyes. When I went to the private sector, that's truly where my eyes were open and said, oh my God, the risks are the same, but the protections are non-existent. Right? Like it was absolutely crazy to me. The companies that I have worked for have cutting edge AI, quantum, semiconductors, robotics, satellites, like everything you could possibly imagine, but they don't have the protection of the US government yet, because a lot of times these become classified later on. They didn't have those protections. And I'm like, oh my God, the risks are exactly the same, but the protections are negligible. How can I help protect what we've got going on here? And that's where I really understood that the private sector is the tip of the spear for CI. And so I have sort of never looked back. I have seen this as, oh, this is my new calling, is counterintelligence in the private sector. How can I help be a voice, be a mouthpiece for this concern? Because I really feel like we are still a bit behind where we need to be in terms of protection on this front.
So usually I would ask folks if you can go back in time when you do anything different. I think I'll ask you something slightly different here, just based on your background. So my question to you, for those organizations that aren't doing any flavors of counterintelligence, right, at all, and some people, they won't call it counterintelligence, they'll call it, vulnerability research, maybe something like that, threat research even. So first, would you say they need to prioritize that? And second, if so, how should they start?
Yeah. I completely understand the limitations and the frugality of companies with the idea of hiring a FTE that is working on this. Like, I understand that that is going to be a real tough sell to your C-suite. And yeah, absolutely. But kudos to you if you are thinking of that and saying like, okay, we need something. And so what I would say is there's a couple of different tracks depending on your budget. You can absolutely hire a consulting company like Viance to come in and say, here are your biggest risks from a CI perspective, from a human risk perspective. This is what you should focus on, right? And there are boutique organizations that will tell you that information. And that way you at least are armed with the basics to say like, okay, here now we know what the biggest issues are. If that is not within your budget to do, then I would say just bringing in some level of training about counterintelligence red flags only, like what to look for that should send up sparks to the people who are currently responsible for that. And I would say more than likely that's going to be in that hiring and HR sort of domain, because they're probably the ones who are sort of the front lines of that. So bring in some training for them and your high risk population. And that is a completely cost effective way. You can talk to a lot of people with one briefing that will at least arm them with something to say, that's interesting. I never thought to look for that before. And that will at least give them some knowledge to raise a hand if there's a concern. And you can go from there. So those are two options that I think are more effective than having an FTE. I would still suggest that if you have one or more of those high risk areas within your remit in your company, I would really suggest you can get an insider threat and counterintelligence person in one, like me. I'm a dual hatted. You can find people like that. There's tons of great talent out there. My network is bursting with amazing talent on this front. People who are mostly former government turned private, hungry, ready to find the bad guys, ready to help your company protect that critical data. So that's like plan A. Plan B is have a consultant. Plan C is at least get some folks some training.
Love it. And it's funny you mentioned your network, Lisa. So if people want to connect with you, if they want to learn more, just say hi, what have you, what's the best way?
I'm definitely a LinkedIn person. I really didn't for the longest time, because when you work with the federal government, especially in classified space, um, we sort of put LinkedIn as like the devil, right? Like it's the last thing that you should be on. You're gonna get pitched. You're gonna get recruited. It's gonna be bad. You can't have any of this. Since coming to the private sector, I have realized one, it's not that serious. There are things that are happening, but you should have your eyes open for that, whether it's scams, counterintelligence issues, nation states, whatever the case may be. Like you should have your eyes open in any social media setting. But two, it really is the best way to build out like-minded people within your network, at least that we currently have. I'm sure at some point it will go away like MySpace and, a new version will come along. But so I am definitely pro LinkedIn. Please feel free to message me on that. I'm actually incredibly responsive to people. I get a lot of messages asking for mentorship, asking for just for me to review something. I'm incredibly responsive. I'm here to help. We are all in this together. I am all about sharing TTPs, IOCs, ways that we can do this better. I am 100% in favor of all of that. So please reach out, and you can find me. You can find me there, and I'm pretty sure I will respond to you unless you're crazy.
Amazing, amazing. And there you heard it, folks. Reach out and connect with Lisa. She definitely has a lot of experience in this space. Well, this has been a great, great episode. So, Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Ward. This was really fun to talk about, and good luck with the podcast. It's super exciting. I also have a podcast, so I'm going to plug that real quick. Lots to unpack. There is the podcast that I have with my best friend. And it has absolutely nothing to do with cybersecurity. So if you are looking for cybersecurity podcast, that's not the one. Stay on Ward with Guardians of the Data. But for lots to unpack there, we unpack everything about life, everything about working through what it is to live in this modern age and doing it with each other so that it's maybe just a little less hard. So check us out. We have Substack, we have a podcast. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. Thank you very much for joining in. If you learned something today, please tell someone else. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte-scale data protection without the fuss, please visit Centra.io. Catch you next time.